When you're turning a corner, does your Honda Odyssey make a noise like this? Welcome to You Can Fix Anything. Today I'm going to show you the step-by-step procedure to replace the drive axle in this Honda Odyssey. I have my jack and jack stand ready to get this car up in the air, but before that front tire goes off the ground, you're going to want to loosen the lug nuts. Now I have a breakover bar here with a 22mm socket on it. You could also use the wheel wrench that came with your car. Now is probably a good time to mention that all the parts and tools that I use making this video are listed in the description below. And if you click the link I provided, you'll put a little bit of change in my pocket as an Amazon associate. I'd much appreciate that. As you prepare to jack the car up, you want to be sure you put the jack in the right position. There's a reinforced place right here that is designed to withhold the weight of the car, and so use that as your jacking point. And as with the wheel wrench, you can use the jack that is in your car. I have a video on where to find it because Honda did a great job of hiding it on this particular car. Now that you have the car up in the air, but before you take the tire off, you have it on the jack stand, you want to make sure it's stable, so give it a good shake. All right, now we can take these lug nuts off. Already all loose, so just verifying that. One thing you don't want to do is drop this in the dirt. Now, my garage is out of commission, so I'm working on a sidewalk today, but if you get dirt and sand in there, it'll gall up the threads, and they'll just be a problem after that point, and then you'll have to replace it if you really want to get it fixed, which I do not recommend. So put these in a clean place. And give it a good hit. There we go. It's off. So now that we have the rotor and brake assembly exposed, I do want to point out a couple of things. One is, this is the reason that I need to replace it. This is what happened first. The boot split, let the grease out, let rain and other junk in. And so when I take a hard left or hard right turn, you heard that clicking noise at the beginning. The other thing, actually, you should not hear that. There's way too much play in there. It has just gotten rain and grease out, dirt in, all of that, and it's just completely worn out. The second interesting thing that I want to share is that this drive axle assembly has been replaced previously. And the way I know that is this nut right here. You're supposed to use a punch to bend this into the keyway, and this was not done when it was replaced. If this was the original from Honda, it would have been bent in. And you'll see at the end of my video, you want to do that. It just takes that risk away from this ever accidentally loosening up. Now, we do torque the crap out of it, but even with that, you want to make sure you use all the little safety things that Honda provides by their engineers. So the next part you're going to need is this 36mm socket. Now this is not something that people commonly have in their toolbox. In fact, this one's total overkill. This is an impact socket, 1/2-inch drive. And you can get away with just the chrome socket. You can get the shallow one. This is a deep well socket. So as I was saying, there's two ways to loosen this. Put the socket on. If you have any friends who are nearby, they can go get in the car, step on the brakes, and hold this. Since I live out in the boonies, I'm going to use a screwdriver. Now there's a very slight chance that you could actually crack one of the ribs in here, but I have yet to have that happen. Let me put a little muscle and weight behind this. Whew. And by weight, that was 220 pounds on there, and it did not come loose. So my guess is the person that put this on probably just hammered it to death with an impact wrench. Didn't torque it like you're supposed to. Let me get a bar to extend this breakover. Well, I was able to find this old pipe in the barn, which I guess is why we keep barns alive. Hide old stuff like this. So I'm going to slip it onto this and add some serious leverage. See what happens. Oh, holy cow. All right, plan C. I'm gonna put a little WD-40 in here. Let that do some soaking. Let that soak for a few minutes. Now obviously you're going to want to wipe all this off before you put it back together. But I'm going to let that soak for a few minutes. If that doesn't work, then there's plan D. Well, it looks like we're going to have to go with plan C. I've let this sit for about 30 minutes now as I looked for plan D, which was using my propane torch. Unfortunately, I found the bottle, but I didn't find the torch head because I was going to heat up the nut and see if that could break the rust or whatever is holding it. Hopefully this WD-40 is going to do the trick. Oh, it's probably a good time to mention that the content on this channel is for entertainment purposes only. Don't be so dumb as to do everything I do. Oh, wow. You saw that thing bending, didn't you? Holy smoke. Woo! Actually bought this when I was in college. It's a Mac brand. So this quality is going to be like Snap-on. But I really didn't want to break it because I've had this for 35 years and don't want to replace it. Thank you, Jesus. So now, this is just going to spin off nice and easy. Yeah, it was not rusty, but you can see that the WD-40 did get back behind there, so that played a part in getting it loose. Next we want to get this axle loose in the splines. My bet is they didn't put any anti-seize or anything on there, so you just have to knock it with a hammer. There, actually super easy. Next thing we want to do is to remove this cotter key or cotter pin. I'm using needle nose pliers. Those seem to work the best for me, but regular pliers will work too. Just squeeze that together. There we go. You have a couple different choices here. One, you could go with just a 17mm end wrench on here. I'm going to go ahead, use my breakover bar again, and I added a longer extension on there. Not because I need to, but because I just want to get it away from the camera so you can see better. That broke loose pretty easy. Now I can just spin that off by hand. Well, that's some gunk on the end of the threads. All right, now to get this loose, what you're going to want to do is to take a hammer and just knock right here. That shock will cause this to drop out of the hole. You might need to use a little bit of pressure on there. I'm going to try it without, and generally you don't need a big hammer for this. You just got to give it a handful of good smacks, and that shock will cause it to drop out. If that doesn't work, yeah, then you can get a bigger hammer, but I'm going to go ahead and try with a smaller one first. Try to get my hand here. One other thing you can try, put this nut back on to where the threads are flush with the top, just like that, and try to hit it down this way. There. Either one of those can do the job. I just decided to do it this way for time's sake. Now the downside of this is that the nut is spinning. There we go. And you just hit it here, knock it out. Now to keep this nut safe, I'm going to go ahead and thread it back on here. All right, get that out of the way. The next step is to take this nut off the lower ball joint. Now you can see that it's held on by this little clip and a castle nut. And so what I'm going to need to move that clip first, then take the nut off. So to take this clip off, you can use either a screwdriver. I'm going to use these nail nose pliers again, but just kind of unclips like this and then slips out. So I'm going to go with a 19mm combination wrench and just loosen this up. Now that did not want to loosen up, and there's not clearance in there to be able to put a socket and the breaker bar. So I'm going to show you an old trick of the trade, and that is you get a second one like this. You can just slip it on there, and that's going to give you your extension. Let's see. We'll go ahead and throw some WD on there just to help it off a little bit easier. I should be able to spin it off by hand now. This next step is going to take a little bit of coordination, so let me show you my setup here. So here you can see we have a sway bar and then your lower control arm. I put the breakover bar underneath here so I can pry this lower control arm down, and I've added that nifty pipe to the end of that, so I'm not going to have to press too hard. So as I'm putting pressure downward on that, I'm going to be taking my 32-ounce hammer and hitting right here and let that shock loosen things up. Get a little downward pressure. This one's been a little bit of a bear, so I'm going to put a little more WD-40 on there and let it sit for a bit. All right, let that go for about 10 or 15 minutes. Let's try again. There we go. Now that that's loose, we can just pry this down and pull this out of the way. There we go. As you can see, that WD-40 did its job. It covered the entire surface. Now you're not going to want to leave that there. At the end of this job, we're going to take this brake clean and spray that on there. That's to degrease the surface, because you want the two tapered mating surfaces to have adequate surface tension, and if they're covered in oil, it's just not going to hold, and you're going to want them to kind of stick together again. And so got to make sure all that oil is cleaned off. Now that the lower ball joint is out, it's just a matter of pushing this back out here, getting this pulled out. There we go. Now to get the other end of this axle out of the transmission, you're going to need a pry bar, something like this, that we're going to get right in between the end of the axle and the transmission. There we go. Jiggle this a little bit, pull it out. Now it's a good idea, I should probably tell you this ahead of time, have a small pan under there to catch any oil that comes out. I think it's going to be minimal because we just have one side of the car jacked up. Yeah, looks like nothing's leaking out, which is nice. Well, you have the axle out, now it's time to take a look at the seal. Make sure that during disassembly it didn't get any cuts, which still looks in good condition. Obviously it hasn't been leaking, so I'm not going to switch it out. But if it did have a leak, now's the time to do it. Since the seal is dry, as a part of reassembly, I would recommend putting either some silicone gel on there or just get a little bit of automatic transmission fluid just to help make sure that it gets a little bit of lubrication as you're reassembling it and doesn't get damaged on the way in. Now to put this in, basically just do the opposite when you took it out. So we're going to guide it in this way. I'm going to give it some support under here. I apologize if I'm blocking the camera. Get that lined up. You're going to want to turn it a little bit as you're going in to line up the splines. There we go. Get this lined up a little better. Yeah, I think I felt it go in. No, it didn't. There we go. That went in. Now there's no space there. Another way to double check this is to reach in, try to pull a little bit above the boot. Doesn't come out, so that's locked into place. I could really feel it when it went in. I felt it bottom out and became very solid instead of that hollow sound I was hearing before. Now that we have this axle out, you can see just how bad a condition it was in. There has been just dirt and water and grime getting in there. I can just feel how loose it is. Those bearings are about to blow out of there. And before we slip the new axle into the hub, we want to make sure that we put a little something on the splines to make sure that they don't get any rust and seize up on us later on. So it's just kind of helping out the next person that does the job. You can either use anti-seize, I looked for mine, I couldn't find it, or you can just use some bearing grease like this. Doesn't take a lot, just want to get a little bit on the surface to keep the rust away. Also helps it assemble very easily. Now that we have that on, we're going to pull the hub assembly out of the way. Kind of get this rearranged to where we can guide it in here. There we go. Getting started. Get everything lined up here. Okay, pull. All right. There we go. Okay. You can see it's through. Just had to turn the rotor a little bit to get it lined up. I'm going to go ahead and put the nut on here just to hold it in place. That way, as I'm putting the lower ball joint back together, I don't accidentally pull it out. Let's go ahead and get this hub assembly turned back out of the way. As I mentioned before, we want to make sure that we clean all of the WD-40 off that. Have some brake clean. This stuff works crazy good. You can also spray it on your rag and just wipe that around. And clean that surface really well. We want to do the same. It's a little bit more difficult to see, but we'll just go ahead and clean down below too, where that goes into. There we go. Got that one nice and clean. Ready to go back together. So to put this back together, you're going to need to pry this down either by hand or with a pry bar. I'm going to try by hand first. Basically got to get that down there. Get it lined up. And it pops back up into place. Now before putting the castle nut back on, it does not hurt to put just a little bit of grease on these threads, because this is going to have a tendency, it's going to want to spin as you're tightening the nut down, unless you have a jack under here to get that wedged again. And so we're just going to try this, put it on first, so that way it's able to go on easily without any issues. And then as it begins to wedge it up, it'll get tight before it has a chance to start spinning. Now, ideally, I'm sure this has a torque spec, but because of the clearance issue, there's no room to get a torque wrench in there. And so I'm just going to get it kind of as tight as I can. And then we're going to have to line the cotter key back up with the hole. Let's see if I can find where the hole, oh good, it's lined up. And so in this case, I'm going to come in from this, I guess I need to come in from this side. Put that in. And then that clips around just like that. You can see that, I'll bring the camera here, that it is hooked back into place. I did look that up real quick, and it turns out that the torque spec on the lower ball joint nut is 43 foot-pounds. So if you have a shallow 19 millimeter socket, and a torque wrench with a small enough head that it will fit in there, you can go with 43 foot-pounds. Otherwise, I recommend 2 to 3 grunts. As I recommend with the lower ball joint, you want to make sure that this tie rod end is also free of any grease or debris. So just give a little wash with brake clean. Wipe it with a clean rag, because you want those two mating surfaces to not have anything to keep them apart. So we'll just put this back together, line it up. You want to put just a touch of grease on these threads. That will help the nut go on smoothly and keep the rust away. Just tighten it up a little bit, then I'll get the torque wrench. All right, let's take this up to 41, 2, 3. Lock it. There we go. No reason to click it 20 times. Put the cotter key back in. You can use your needle nose pliers, or you can just use your thumb to bend that back. So that's done. All right, we're getting close to the finish line. You were doing great. So now we're going to go back to this 36 millimeter big boy right here. I'm going to tighten it down with my ratchet. Now, one thing you do want to do is go ahead and move this to the bottom. The transmission may hold it, but just in case it wants to turn, that will catch it. All right, so we've gotten this fairly tight. So what we're going to do next is move over to the torque wrench. It's got a crazy amount of torque to it. So I'm going to lock it, and I'm going to run this thing all the way up to 181, I think, if I remember right. I'll put it in the description below if I'm wrong, but I think it was 181. But when you get that high, I mean, geez, seriously, between 170 and 190, is it really going to make a difference? If it was 181 or 179? By the way, the answer is no. So I don't even know the last time I turned it up this high. This is a little bit insane. There's 181. All right, so just so I don't get in your way, I'm going to go from this side. Usually I put it on this side and lean down on it just to save the back, but for your benefit, I'm going to go on this side here. There we go. All right. This should make a nice loud click. Woo! Yeah, that's it. Now the last thing we do, the last Yahoo forgot, before we put this back on, just punch this in. Now, it would be nice if this wasn't lined up here. I guess that's probably my fault with how I put it in, but there we go. Let me show you a little closer look. Got that bent in, so it's locked into place. Now all that's left is to put the tire back on, get this thing back on the ground. Now, just to keep anyone from hassling me about the torque specs on the Honda Odyssey when tightening the lug nuts, it's 80 foot-pounds, and you want to tighten them in a pattern like this. You skip every other one, and you go around 2 times. Okay? If you completed this job with me, congratulations, you did great. It wasn't too hard, but it wasn't too easy. It was just about right. So if this video was helpful with your job, you could feel free to throw me a thank you. You know, these YouTube videos don't pay that much. The affiliate links don't pay that much. And so I have a couple links below. One is for buy me a coffee and one is for PayPal me. So if you want to throw a monetary thank you my way, I would appreciate it and keep me motivated to keep making these videos. Have a great day.